everyone, and welcome. We are here today to talk about how organizations and how businesses can have an impact in the work that they're doing. I am joined today by two very special guests. We've got Paul here, who runs an organization called purposeAMPLIFIED, and he'll share a little bit more about the work that he's doing. And we've got Rima here from Impactful. So welcome to you both. Thanks so much for joining. Paul and Rima, would you be happy to give a little bit of an intro as to who you are and why you're here and talking about this today? Rima, why don't we start with you?
Awesome. Yeah, so nice to meet everybody here and good to join you both, Sky and Paul. I was an Escape founding member way back in 2014. So had my own Escape journey from a job in audit at a big professional services firm, and then went on to do a whole range of things from learning and development to management and managing communities, both with Escape and an organization called Remote Year, where we were kind of taking people around the world as digital nomads. And then most recently, I completed Year Here, which is a social innovation and entrepreneurship program through which I founded Impactful, which is focused on helping small businesses have more impact, both social and environmental. And we kind of make as much of that information as accessible and easy to understand as possible, kind of understanding that businesses make up the vast majority of organizations in our economy, in our society, and they kind of need to be on board with changing to kind of include people and profit in what they do every day.
Great. Thanks, Rima. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to hear. I've had a sneak peek at your book, and I'm excited to hear a bit more about what you're doing. Paul, are you happy to give us a bit of an intro?
Of course. Hello, Sky and Rima, and it's great to be here. Thank you for asking me. A little bit about me. I have also changed careers like Rima, but in a quite radically different way. I was a meteorologist once upon a time, and that's what I studied at university 20 odd years ago. And I then went and joined the military. I was a forecaster in the Navy for 16 years or so, and I then left in 2014 and immediately went back to studying. And I did a master's degree in business and sustainability. And then having got a little bit stuck about what to do next, that's when I came through Escape Stores and I did the Career Change Accelerator 5 years ago now, back in 2016. And that's when I met the two of you around about that time. And since that time, I spend my days trying to change the minds of small businesses in particular through a number of different projects that I've done to become more sustainable. And so last year I launched my own business, purposeAMPLIFIED, as you mentioned, specifically to help businesses do that through the B Corp framework. I'm a B leader too, and I'm a huge fan of the B Corp movement. So I do a few other things as well, but for today's purposes, that's how I spend most of my time at the moment.
Amazing. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for sharing. And for those of you who don't know, which is probably quite a lot of you, I'm Sky. I'm from Escape. And I've been working at Escape for the last 6 years, helping people to change their careers, do something different, and trying to help more businesses to be more progressive and helping really talented people to put their talents to good use in great organizations. So that's me, and that's why I'm here. But enough about me. For you two, so we've got a bunch of different questions to go through, just some advice and kind of showing people what is possible as a small business to have an impact. And I guess the first question, which I'll start with you, Rima, is why should businesses prioritize making impact? Why is that important?
I think it's a really good question. And I think for us as Impactful, obviously it's in our name, but actually every business, every individual already has an impact. So this is not so much about kind of just creating impact from nothing. It's about looking at the impact you're already having and thinking, okay, well, am I having a positive or a negative impact? Am I having any unintended or intended consequences on the organizations that I work with, the people that I kind of connect with in the day-to-day running of the organization? What's my impact on the environment? And actually deciding as an organization that you can have a positive impact on all of those stakeholders. And businesses are kind of like the biggest part of our economy, and I think we underestimate the influence that they can have on the wider world and who they interact with. So, and I think we're being asked from a lot of different places in our economy, and like from government, from consumers, from suppliers, to start changing how we think about these things. So I think we're being asked to do it whether we like it or not, and so businesses should kind of take that first step and start looking at it for sure.
Nice. And Paul, I guess the same question to you, but Do you think, yeah, I guess there's, at the moment, it seems to be a real movement behind this sort of, impact in businesses and people asking this. And maybe it's because of all the bubbles that I'm in, but I seem to see a lot of people talking about it. And I guess for people who haven't thought about impact as being important for them, why would you say that they should prioritize thinking about it?
I'd say you should definitely prioritize thinking about impact, and every day that goes by where you don't do that, the need, I would say, will become more acute. Rima made a really good point there. All businesses do have an impact. You can't pretend that they don't in some way. And so to just think about that and acknowledge that is perhaps the first step. But why should you? There are several arguments. Firstly, there's maybe the moral argument that actually recognizing you do have an impact, we should be doing something about that, particularly the negative aspect of that. So that unpacks all sorts of things about measuring and determining what that impact is. So the business collectively, globally, has had done enormous damage to the planet and societies in lots of different ways. And however big or small your company is, you kind of played a part in that. So there's a moral argument, but there's also an opportunity, huge opportunity in lots of different ways. And I think we'll probably explore this a little bit more later in this recording. But you're missing out on that opportunity if you don't think about impact as well. And finally, I'd say there's a financial one too. Businesses that don't do this will fail. I think that's a reasonably certain thing to say. You might fail next year, it might be 10 years, but you will fail if you don't think about your place in the world and the impact that you create. So that would be my three things of why you should consider impact.
Nice. And I guess one question that I have, that I guess a lot of people probably will have, is, we tend to think of certain businesses as being impactful. We think, oh, well, somebody's working on that environmental cause, or that's a purposeful business, by the nature of the mission that they're trying to pursue every day. But if you are starting up a shop, or if you are working as a plasterer, or you're starting up some sort of I guess an organization in a trade that normally isn't known for the purpose or the mission, do you think that it's possible? Can any business have a positive impact and make a difference? Or is this just relevant for people who are kind of already working in those spaces? Yeah, whoever would like to answer.
Yeah, I think something that when we were doing some research around impactful, we found the statistic that 99% of businesses are small to medium-sized enterprises. So every single individual organization might seem small or kind of in a very kind of small part of the economy, but actually to create that change, to create a kind of more just and more environmentally sustainable economy and society, we actually need every single one of those organizations to play their parts. And even if you're not specifically in an environmental industry or kind of working with people, for example, you can still do so much. There's so much within your business's operations. And we talk about your team, your value chain and supply chain, and your impact on the environment as kind of the three core kind of operational impact areas that you can have as a business. And that doesn't change what you create as a product or who your customers are. That's just kind of fixing and addressing the way that you're having an impact internally as an organization. So even if you have a look at those and don't really change what you do as a kind of as your mission, you can still transform the amount of positive impact you're having. Yeah, so I think absolutely every single business can and has a responsibility and the opportunity that Paul was talking about to have more impact.
Yeah, I guess, Paul, the B Corp movement, I guess, is a good example of this, because you look at the kind of breadth of organizations that are B corporations, and it's quite vast, maybe organizations that you wouldn't typically think about. So what, I guess, from your perspective of helping organizations to become B Corps and understanding the process from some of the non-traditionally purposeful or impactful businesses, do you have any, what do you think about that, about those organizations making a difference and ways that they can do that?
Yeah, I do. And you absolutely can as any business. And there's the argument I was already made, I suppose, that you should. But in terms of B Corp, you're right, there's an enormous breadth. And it's, the noise and the sort of focus on what you see and read and consume as content as people might be on the brands that have a B2C, that are retail, they're the ones that get the most noise. But there's law firms, there's an accountancy firm, there's architects, there's all sorts of different companies. And if you've got a business that perhaps isn't in an environmental industry, if you're a service-based business, that you're not making anything, so your carbon footprint is going to be comparatively pretty small, well, maybe you have to think a little bit smarter about what you do. But it could be the social aspect, which the B Corp certification incorporates as well. Who are you serving with whatever your business does? And you can maybe, of course, treat all your stakeholders, your staff, better than perhaps you might have been doing. Think about get creative about how you do that. But actually, who are your core products for? What's your business model trying to serve? And that might require some careful thought. If you think, well, I'm just a solicitor, well, you just have practiced various parts of law. Well, how can you do that better? Just doing that more and offering a great quality service. That doesn't make you stand out. Every business tries to do that, but it is absolutely possible. And if you do that, then the rewards could be great in so many different ways.
Amazing. I think that's a good, from both of you, it's a good thing to remind people, because I think it can be an excuse of, we are a law firm, or we're working in some traditional industry that's not necessarily in the green economy, or kind of with some sort of like charitable or purposeful mission. So that's for them, and we just keep doing what we're doing. But the reminder of how you operate internally, who you're thinking about, who your stakeholders are, how you're treating those people, how you're interacting with the people around you, even just small things make quite a big difference. And that it is all of our responsibility, regardless of what industry or type of organization we have, to think about, what that we all can make a difference in some way, small or large, or in whatever we're doing, and that has an impact. I guess in terms of examples, Rima, you spoke a little bit about internally things that you can do, but I'm curious about specifically, what are the kinds of things that small things that small businesses can do in order to have a big impact? Are there easy wins, or places where that can have a big difference?
I think yes. I think in a way there's so many small things you can do. I think one of the places I think is really important to start, as Paul was talking about, with stakeholders. So thinking about your business as an interconnected organization that has relationships with lots of different parties, and understanding those relationships is a really great place to start. So you've got your obvious ones, probably maybe your customers and your investors, maybe your team, but how do you scope out a little bit wider than that? What about your suppliers? What about your local community? And the environment is kind of always there in the background as a kind of underpinning for all of our needs as as a society. And I think with the environment, I think, as we would when we're making business decisions, consider the cost of something or the quality of something, maybe adding that kind of criteria of what is the impact of doing this on the environment, I think can be quite a useful little mind shift in business decision making when you're kind of planning or thinking about what to do and which option to go with. Just adding a criteria around the environment can start shifting slowly some of what you're doing. And similarly with people and teams, I think there's so much to do within kind of recruitment, designing jobs that work for people, helping people kind of progress in their career and learn and grow. Ask your team what they think you could be doing better, how they would like to be progressing in their career, and see if you can actually implement some of those small changes, because those people are the people that you have the biggest influence on every single day, and having that impact can have huge ripple effects in their lives and the lives of the people that they support as well. So I think starting with the environment and the teams and your team would be a really good place to start. And there's so many small things that in the handbook that you mentioned earlier, we kind of cover a lot of those sort of small actions that you can take in those areas in your business.
Nice. Paul, I guess I'm curious about experience that you've had working with B Corps and other purposeful organizations. Are there specific examples of things that you've seen that people can do, fairly easy to implement, but have an opportunity for a big impact?
Yeah, I'd say, and the impact that you have, such a broad term here. You almost, rather than thinking about stuff you can measure, it's actually the more intangible things. And that's where people inside a business, particularly a small business, can have much more of an impact. I think Rima's talked a lot about people, and I think that's really where it has to start. So if you're a small business, it's easy to get your whole team. You've got more control over what you do and the impact you have as a business. So involve everybody, and find out what's important to all of your your staff or your people that work internally. If it's a slightly larger organization, then that's where you go, you find allies. We talked about this last time, you find your tribe within the company, find common ground, and then you take that and you persuade slowly over time, well, quickly, hopefully, other parts of the business and those who've got perhaps the power and authority within that business to make more fundamental changes. Because if you start to do those things, you start having those conversations and coming up with small, impactful things that you're all really passionate about, they'll get done more quickly, but then they start to change the culture. Because if you go for the opposite approach and go, right, okay, let's measure what we're doing badly and let's change that and have lots of data-driven stuff. Well, that's kind of how it used to happen. That's how sort of CSR, was born. Let's measure and set targets and reduce. And it's not very exciting. It doesn't confuse people. And it sort of change as usual. It's sort of incremental change. I think it's more likely to lead to that rather than something that's a bit more fundamental. You won't get fundamental change in a business unless you involve people. So start with that. And I think if you get that right, then everything else will flow from it.
Nice. I've got a bit of a curveball, but it's something that, so we are in the process at Escape of recertifying as a B Corp. So it's been 3 years and they changed the questionnaire. There's a lot more questions. I thought, blimey, there's a lot of stuff in here yesterday. But I suppose as more people become remote organizations, some of this becomes maybe more challenging in a lot of ways. From a people perspective, it's certainly, harder to kind of create that sense of connection in your team when you haven't seen each other for a year, or you're in different time zones or whatever. But also, I was thinking about the environmental impact as a remote organization yesterday when I was thinking about this for Escape, and how can you positively have an environmental impact as a remote organization? All those traditional things that you would think in person, you're recycling, you're thinking about your usage, you're thinking about where your energy comes from, but kind of that blurring of home office, home, that sort of thing. Are there suggestions or ideas that you both have around kind of from a team engagement perspective of anybody that you've seen doing this well, or ideas you have for doing this well, and from an environment perspective for those who are working remotely, who might be trying to incorporate more of this into their work?
A couple of really small things that come up is something we also learn is obviously we've all kind of moved online, which has really good environmental impact in terms of travel and reducing everybody being out and about and the pollution that might create. But one thing that is increasing is the amount of data we're using through our computers and the kind of impact, the kind of carbon impact of all of that. And so there's a lot you can do around switching your web servers and having a look at the impact of using the internet so much and using all these Zoom calls. Can we offset or reduce what we're doing there? Or at least just look at it and kind of say, can we move to more net neutral hosting for our website, for example? And another thing that I saw another organization do recently is when you have a video meeting, there can be a thing where you plant a tree for every meeting that you have. And so little things like that, which sort of build in environmental impact into the digital space, because undoubtedly using the internet and the vast amount that we do has got an environmental impact, even though it doesn't kind of feel like it and it's not quite as obvious to see. I wonder if, Paul, you had any thoughts as well?
Yeah, I certainly do both of those things, particularly the estimating your web, your digital emissions footprint, and you can indeed go carbon neutral for your servers that you use. And there are an increasing number of companies that will do that. It is a challenge though, because if we're trying to reduce environmental impact, Sky mentioned like recycling, which is maybe a tiny thing, but it is physical, and anyone can relate to that because they see things around the workplace or do stuff, or they think about how they travel to work. All that's taken away, and if it's just a call like we're having, that's hard to suddenly physically relate to anything. It's just me and my laptop at home, and the boundary between home and work becomes ever more blurred because you can't put that into compartments. You're not thinking about, well, what are my lunch choices when I'm at work, because you're at home, so you're just sort of having life as normal, and that is harder. There's no two ways about it. So again, you've perhaps got to get a little bit creative. Perhaps the business environmental footprint will have gone down just by the fact people aren't traveling around nearly as much, and that's good. So celebrate that for a start. Particularly if it's a large company where there was a lot of travel involved, and maybe think about who you're reaching out to. I mean, we talked about last time, there's a lot of goodwill about people wanting to help others. So perhaps consider the social aspect more, and that might be, you know, if people are at home more, perhaps noticing more about the communities where they live, they might have observed groups, whether it's charities or some other problem that they want to help with, and start talking about that and exploring that, whether it might be time, it might, rather than financial help as a company, might be pro bono time or skills that you as a company can, you know, that commuting time that people aren't using anymore. They might want to do that in the service of others in some way, and you could do that through the business, even if it's totally unrelated to what that business is. You know, to collaborate. So it is harder from an environmental perspective, but I think there's also a big opportunity there as well. You just have to allow that space to explore that and see what it might lead to. Nice.
Some good ideas there. I've been jotting down some thoughts as trying to do that ourselves at the moment. I suppose in terms of I'm curious about what you both would say are the most efficient ways that you can have an impact as a business. So you know, there are lots of different ways that people do this. They, like we said, they have a social mission. That might be their mission. They might treat their staff well. There's lots of things that people can do. And I guess I'm thinking about this more from a financial perspective, that, you know, we talked about this, I guess, last time when we were thinking about, as an employee, how can you have more purpose? Is it through having a high paid job and donating your part of your salary to, you know, a charity or, you know, a cause, or is it using your time to do something that's purposeful? And I guess the same is true from a organization perspective. You know, you see a lot of people who have 1% for the planet now. You see people who are committing certain amounts of money who may not be a traditional social mission organization. And then there are lots of charities that a lot of the money is spent running the charities rather than doing the impactful work. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are around the most efficient way of having an impact as a business, and if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we've been looking into this, it seems as though there isn't actually one specific way to have impact as a business. And the thing you want to avoid is it feeling like a checkbox exercise where there's a list of things that you just need to do and then you're kind of done. It's kind of happened. The more authentic way of doing it, I think, is to say, this is important to us as an organization, first and foremost, and we're going to find ways of doing that over time. It's not going to be an overnight fix. We're going to look at our organization and say that we care about people, we care about the planet, we would like to improve our impact, and kind of, I guess, decide to go on the journey, decide that it's a process, say that, you know, this is day one, and over the next 6 months or the next year, the next 5 years, we're going to try and continually get a little bit better. And I think once you've got that mindset shift, then you realize that what you do is going to be bespoke to your organization. It's not going to look like another company. You can learn from other organizations and what they're doing, but what's really important is finding the things to start with that motivate and engage your team, that feel sustainable, that are kind of manageable with day-to-day running of the operations of the organization. And also, kind of to Paul's point around pro bono work, it's about asking yourself what you're already good at. So the things you're going to be best at and the places where you're going to have the most impact is thinking about what you already do and what you're really, really great at. So can you use your skills, your products, your services, the things that you've created value from for customers? How can you use those same things to increase your impact as well? And I think those sorts of things can have both commercial value, which is really great, but also you can create that impact. And actually, when you kind of marry the two things together, you're creating something that's much more sustainable, much more embedded within the organization, and something that has legs kind of throughout your kind of business strategy, not just a little peripheral piece of corporate social responsibility or some fundraising that you do once a year. It's kind of core to what you do every day.
Yeah, I'd echo that, and it's to sort of quote an Escape favorite, you know, to have a sort of growth mindset as a business. And actually, if you take positive and negative impact, look at negative impact first. If you as a business are doing things that lead to negative outcomes, because that's just what happens while you make your gadgets or sell your services, well, you can sort of look for the incremental ways of saving money and improving that through efficiency, which was how it was traditionally done. Or you can go, right, if we want to stop doing that, what do we need to change? And there may be costs, there may be upfront costs to doing that. But rather than having a race to the bottom, particularly if you've got tight margins, because it's a sort of an ever decreasing circle, you'll have to stop at some point because you'll have no more margin left, and then it will go into a downward spiral. So make that intervention early and go, okay, let's try and minimize this negative outcome that doing what we do has, by changing processes, changing the way we make something, doing some research. So that's the negative impact. But then the positive impact is a lot about what Rima's just talked about too. It's identifying, using your skills and where you can do good things at the same time. So it's almost not a zero-sum game. You can, everyone, when we say a business has an impact, they've got a net impact. Every business does bad things, even if they're tiny, and the best ones try and eliminate that. But also do good things. And if your good things are outweighing your bad things, then you're halfway there. So at the same time as eliminating or mitigating against the negative things that you're doing, let's try and think positively in that growth mindset about what you could do. What's the possibility? What is the possibility? I challenge businesses and ask the question, how could you make the world a better place? That's a really broad question. And there are so many different ways you can. So to put you on the road to possibility, think about that too. Nice.
I like that. I think it's something that we should all be asking. All of us should be thinking about and asking ourselves, but it's a powerful question. And knowing, as you said, I guess what you've just said, Paul, kind of goes back to what Rima said, if there's no one way, it shouldn't be a checkbox. It shouldn't be, we're doing this, and asking uniquely as an organization, what can you do to improve is a really nice, I really like that framing. It's really nice. So I guess one of the challenges with thinking about this is around the financial aspect. So a lot of people, you talked about margins and people, I think there's a perception, maybe it's lessening somewhat, but there is a perception often that if you are a business that prioritizes purpose, it's over profitability. So I'm curious about the advice you would have to organizations who are concerned about risking profitability for impact. What would you say to those people?
Oh yeah, I think I remember us having the same conversation. Is it kind of one or the other? Are you sacrificing one or the other? But then actually all of the research, the business case just shows that the organizations that invest in impact in a kind of really authentic way are doing better financially. So it isn't an either or question. You're really doing this well so that, and I think it's actually common sense. Like when you really think about it, you think, okay, if I treat my team better, surely they're going to be, they'll be more loyal, they'll be more productive, maybe I'll attract better staff because we have a kind of mission-driven organization, and they're going to treat our customers better, and they're going to feel like much more kind of valued in the organization and perform better. Similarly with your customers, they're looking for quality products and probably a great price, but people are often willing to pay a premium for goods that are ethical and have kind of really been thought out and kind of thought about the environmental impact or the social impact. People are willing to be more loyal to switch to that kind of product. So you're probably going to find yourself retaining those customers, attracting different customers. And I think there's like a lot of other kind of interesting, I think the other one that comes to mind actually is risk. So we've seen with things like the pandemic, with climate change, there are actually huge implications for what this might mean for businesses. And that's not just in 5 or 10 years time, that's like now, the supply chain risks, the different risks around the COVID pandemic and what happened to businesses over the last year. And actually, if you can kind of put yourself in that mindset of what's coming down the pipeline in the future, how do we mitigate these risks? How do we adapt to these challenges? And impact can be a huge way of framing those challenges as opportunities and kind of creating more value for the business. So I definitely wouldn't say that there's a conflict between profitability and purpose or having more impact.
Nice.
Yeah, it will make you more resilient and future-proof in a way, and it might do that in ways that you can't conceive of today. But impact will help you do that. And although there isn't a conflict, I agree. There's definitely not an either or between profitability and impact. It's important to recognise there is a tension there, though. it's all very well all of us saying, oh, just consider impact and just, go down that route completely. But if that causes your business to fail, then you've not served anybody well, including the people you're trying to have a positive impact for. So there is a tension there. But if you're thinking, how's this going to affect my profitability? My question would be, well, why are you thinking about that? Why is that your primary concern? Thinking about your profitability? Because if it is, then you've sort of not quite got it yet. So it's not say, oh, the profits will go down. They might do. It depends. Every company is different, so they might do. But what you will find is if you then make things in a better way, sell things in a better way, sell better things as well, you will, yes, have loyal staff, but you'll have loyal customers as well. All the while you're building up that loyalty of customer base, and whether you can add premiums on because of that product, that's entirely up to you as a business. But while that's happening, you're also doing good things for the planet because of the processes and the other things that you've changed in the business. So as time goes on, that's good stuff's all happening in the background as well. So you can take heart from that, but it's something that you need to consider as a tension. And if you've got external investment to your business, then they're the people that you need to talk about too. But there's in the future, there's risk, as Rima says, but there's also opportunity as well. And conversations around those sorts of things are quite important if you're going to consider making some serious changes to the way that you do things as a business.
Nice, that's a good point. I guess for some of I think people are changing their mindsets about this slightly. I see people changing when you see some of the larger organizations who are becoming B corporations, for example, the likes of Patagonia and Etsy and Dan in UK and the Jamie Oliver Group and some of these, larger organizations who are actually becoming B corporations who are hugely profitable, also hugely profitable. And as you say, the sort of loyalty that comes from having a mission and standing for something and not just saying, oh, we've got a CSR program, but it's really integrated, authentic, to use your phrase, Rima, around it's very authentic to them. And Patagonia's always been like this, of course, it's in their DNA, but them running their classic Black Friday ads saying, do not buy this jacket in the middle of the New York Times, because, they're really, what they want is people to not be having the environmental impact by having a bunch of stuff. And actually, the proportion of people who now will spend extra to buy Patagonia's clothing because of the impact, the positive impact, rather than, oh, it's too expensive and therefore we won't do it. It's like, as you say, it actually increases retention and also traction. So I think that's something that I always think is helpful to keep in mind. Some of these big organizations, it is part of why they are successful, rather than they are successful despite it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
A couple more questions. I suppose in terms of trends, I'm curious about trends. So people who are watching this, who are thinking about purpose and impact in their organizations and maybe trying to embed more of that into what they do, are there trends that you see coming up in this space or in generally that businesses can make the most of now? They could get in there with Paul, or Rima?
Yeah, sorry. I think Paul, might have a lot to say about sort of B Corps. It feels like it's a huge growing trend as well.
Yeah, that was going to be my obvious point. Is just B Corp as a trend. You'll both know, particularly Sky, that just how much it's taken off. And 2020 in particular, and this is carrying on into 2021, just enormous growth, and just showed as a movement how resilient it's been to the shock of the pandemic, but also just the appetite, the sheer level of appetite that is out there. There are new B Corps nearly every day at the moment, and they did their 5th birthday sort of launch celebration back in December, where it was almost 450 B Corps. It's knocking on the door 500 now, and there's a reason for that. And it's not just it's a sort of a lasting trend, I suppose. It's because I would imagine that businesses are recognizing the fact that it's a really useful framework that you can jump onto as a business that covers all aspects. It's holistic. and it's something that's out there and it's accessible too. So that is a trend. If you're sort of searching for ways of making positive impact and trying to define and get help and ways of doing that, B Corp as an idea, it's one of, for me anyway, it's one of the great things about it, is a really good solution to go and research and investigate and see if that's right for you and to give you ideas. So I'd say that very much as a trend. I think the other trend as well is maybe that casting around, seeing who we can help, that need generally society to want to help others. The pandemic has obviously shone a light on all sorts of different groups, and not just that, actually the Black Lives Matter as well, in groups that have not been represented well in our society, and businesses are starting to think about that a bit more. Lots and lots to work on and explore there, because it might not be a natural collaboration for you as a business to suddenly support Black Lives Matter. Well, that's got kind of traditionally had never anything to do with us as a business. So how do we do that? So I see that as a trend, and a lot of questions, a lot of research, and a lot of perhaps experimentation and trying out things before actually finding something that is right for you. So it's not necessarily a trend, it's more a mindset, I think. I think businesses are doing that more and more, which is all to the good.
Nice.
And I think, like, bouncing off that a little bit with the pandemic, there seems to be maybe just like a bit of a window of opportunity post-pandemic, as we sort of figure out what the world might look like post all of the stuff that's happening and all that we've learned over the past year. I think a lot of people's priorities have shifted, what they think is important, what they value, the relationships they want to build, how they want to work. And we've got maybe the kind of next year or so to actually create a different kind of economy, perhaps. And I think the government is maybe open to that as well. They kind of realize they need to kind of think of interesting strategies to grow and to rebuild the economy, but that probably won't look the way that it looked before the pandemic. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for businesses to try new things, to innovate, to come up with new ideas. You've seen so much innovation with how, say, for example, restaurants have transitioned how they run and how they start going to things like delivery kits at home. And that space for change, because we've all had to adapt over the past year, I think there's going to be more of that adapting as we start to think about what do offices look like, what do they mean for the future, how do we use them, what does it mean to be part of a local community now that everyone's sort of more home-based and kind of localized. I think we're going to be asking a lot of different questions, and I think there's this window of opportunity of change where we could actually build things better. And you kind of see probably the hashtag around Build Back Better, and also the kind of longer term changes from climate change. How do we recover in a green way? And all of that, just that rhetoric and conversation seems to be a lot in the media there. So hopefully we can use that as a bit of a jumping off point for more positive impact based business building and change.
Yeah, I think the landscape is very much changing. It's very innovative place at the moment in terms of not just tech, but ideas too, and that Build Back Better. How do we do things differently? Loads and loads of conversations about that. And I think those that want to try things, the marketplace is a bit more receptive to that. Not just government policy supporting various different ideas, but the marketplace too. And that helps because there are collaborators. If you're doing it, there are lots of other people doing it too. You will find another business or more businesses that are thinking the same way as you. But lots of research too. Just think of donor economics. The action labs that spawn from that as one example. But there are others too. So now's not the time to stand still. Now's the time to go out there and be bold. You have to be bold. It's something else you should do.
Nice. It definitely feels like the time is now, kind of this all of everything that's been happening is kind of crystallized in the last year, and which is good. Seems like going in the right direction. Feels like there's an appetite for it as well, which is really nice. Yeah. So in terms of just maybe two more short questions, if that's all right. But I think I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday around, so we've just released the Escape 100, which I'm not sure if you guys have seen, but it's a list of 100 organizations who are best organizations to escape to in 2021. And this is a list that we did last year, we've done this year, and we've changed the calculations and the scoring, and it's a lot of detail, a lot of detail that went into it. And one of the criteria that we have is whether or not they're a B corporation. So that is one of our criteria, which obviously is a statement about how we feel about B corporations. But I guess, and the person that I was speaking to was asking, well, they're a social enterprise, so, but they're not a B corporation. And why have we said, why is there not a social enterprise option and there's a charity option, etc.? And I think the accreditation thing is a bit of a minefield. So I think that it can feel a little overwhelming and you're not sure, who do you go with and how does that look? And there's so many of these different programs that you can be a part of, whether it's kind of a B corporation or a social enterprise UK or an accredited charity, or doing some of these carbon programs that you can do as well, where you sign up and you get the little badge. And it's a bit of it feels like it's a bit of a minefield. So I'm curious about your perspectives on any suggestions for best in practice. I know, Paul, you love B corporations. That's a great one, and I do as well, obviously. But I guess the question is for people, why should they bother? Because that was also a challenge that we had on the Escape 100 is, it's obviously work to become a B corporation, and we used it as a criteria because it's a stamp of somebody's actually walking the talk. They've gone through the process, they've demonstrated that they are doing the right things instead of just saying that they're doing the right thing. So I'm curious if there are other things that people should be looking for and what they should be looking out for if they do look at some of these accreditations. That was a long-winded way of saying it, but hopefully that made sense in some way.
Yeah, Paul, maybe you should touch on B Corps and then I can add a few other.
Yeah, it is a very good question. The accreditation stroke certification, just generally, what should you do? Why should you do it? What's the benefits of the work that is going to be involved in getting there? And it isn't necessarily straightforward. Now, of course, I'm a massive advocate for B corporations, so I would say it's the best because it touches every business. But I'd also say it's complementary. If you're, depending on what you do as a business, there are lots of others that there might be some that are requirements for regulatory purposes. There might be some that just your market that you operate in almost demands that you have them, because you won't win business if you don't have this certification, because that's what everybody expects. I would love for that to change, but if that's the market that operates, then you're expected to do that, and you have a competitive disadvantage if you don't. Then of course pursue that. And there's a little bit of me, and I can't quite believe I'm saying this, that doesn't really want to chase certifications and badges and things you can put on websites. I feel the same about awards as well. People celebrate and go, I've got this and that and the other, nominated for XYZ. It's like, well, so why chase those things? But the reality is that you need to be recognized. And if you don't want to go for something that means something to future customers, to future staff, to the people that you want to influence, you've got to be incredibly strong about your brand. And it's really something that will only happen if you've been operating for probably quite a long time. How many wonderful sustainable companies can we think of that are not B Corps? Well, I can think of a couple, Interface being one, if you've ever heard of them, but they've been doing it for a very long time and have gone on a very long road to be carbon positive whilst making carpet tiles. And they're a wonderful company, but they're so far gone, they almost don't need to be a B Corp. So if you're choosing to sort of shun all of this accreditation, then you're going to have to struggle, I would say, to get noticed, to shout above crowd, which is not to say that's right or wrong, but you do need to have a serious think about it. And for B Corp specifically, it isn't just a stamp. It's not just a nice letter that you can put on all your branding. It's much, much more than that, because it's independent, verifiable, but that you are walking the talk, as you said, Sky, and you are then doing so much more than you would have otherwise been doing as a business. So of course I would say explore B Corps more, but it's not the only one. And if you're not going to, have a serious think about why.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think that accreditations are a really useful tool, but if you're doing it for the accreditation's sake, then that's probably not the right place to start, right? Like if you're doing it because you need a framework to help you understand how to have more impact, amazing. The BIA, the B Corps assessment, is phenomenal at giving you an idea of what it actually means to be an impact driven business. If you're doing it just to get the stamp, it probably won't feel right. It will become that tick exercise. But if you're using it to kind of just give yourself some inspiration, then the B Corp methodology is really brilliant. But there are also others. There's Future Fit, and there's also some reporting frameworks which give you kind of more specific detail if you happen to be in one industry, or you need kind of more depth around specific topics. They're all really handy. They're all kind of learning tools and guidance to help you understand what good looks like. And they should help you change within your organization, right, and actually create that sustainable impact, and kind of be able to help you talk about it and measure it and feel confident in your approach. And then, hey, if you get that accreditation or if you get recognized for it on top of that, amazing, because you're actually doing the work already. That the kind of the stamp or the badge or the promo and the branding and being on the B Corp's website or the Future Fit website, that's the recognition for already having done a good job. So if you're getting one of those stamps, brilliant. But you, hopefully what it has done is it's shown you how to have impact underneath it all. And as Paul was saying, like, doing it yourself is great. It's just, how do you communicate it and how do you draw attention to yourself? And I think sometimes the stamps become kind of shorthand for good, and that can kind of work in a good and bad way sometimes, because it misses out organizations that maybe are good but haven't been able to go through the process yet. But all it's doing is kind of giving people a recognizable awareness of what might be good. And because they've been around for a while as well, a lot of these accreditations just give people a bit of an easier time of trying to understand what this organization does, and a bit of credibility too, I think.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'd also add to that, washing is still so rife. If you are just claiming without any sort of third party backing as to what you're claiming, then you are to, criticism or being questioned, and you've got to be prepared for that. You've got to be prepared to back up your own claims in a quite public, transparent way. And so why not get somebody who'll do that for you, who you can trust and know that you're doing right? Yeah, you don't want to be accused of marking your own and shouting about it. So that's something else to add too.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, because people are paying attention. People really are paying attention. They really are. You can see the backlash on things like social media if people say that they prioritize diversity, and then you look at their channels and there's no diversity in their channels or their team, or they never talk about it, or people say, oh well, we're working on SDG, but they don't mention anything on their website, or people will call you out on it, and people really are paying attention. So it is important to be able to back up whatever you're saying that you're doing with actually doing something. And I think even as a framework, using the BIA, the impact assessment tool from B Corp, it's free to use, is a great way to see, like, oh, actually, what do you need to have in place to be considered a progressive business? Because I think a lot of the things you'd think, oh well, yeah, we're progressive and we do this and this, but actually looking at it, what that actually entails is a lot more depth than just recycling, and recycling in your office and making sure your staff have 25 days of holiday. I think that's a good starting place at the very least, just to get a sense of actually where are the gaps in what you're doing. Great. I guess last question, I guess a parting thought is, if a business was going to make just one change today, like a small thing that they could do today, this week, in the next month, what would you recommend that they do or focus on? What's one small thing that they can do?
Oh, it's so hard, isn't it? I feel
it is. Go on, Rima.
Sorry. I think it's not a small thing, but I think it's the start of the thing. It's create a process for me. I think remember that it's not going to be the overnight success. It's not going to be this kind of checkbox exercise. It's a process. So even if that looks like 10 minutes a week in your team meetings and your weekly kind of all hands or whatever like your structures look like inside your business, carve out some time to dedicate to at least talking about this, because those conversations will start the entire kind of journey of, okay, well, what do we care about? What does it look like for us? What accreditation or framework might we be interested in using? And so I think once you've started to carve out a time to say this is important to us, so much flows from there. So hopefully it's a small enough action, but I would say, yeah, create a space for yourself or for you and your team to start having these conversations internally and move from there.
Nice. Paul?
Yeah, I'd agree with Rima. It starts with a conversation, but actually you've gone a step further by actually making that space available. I put the challenge to businesses: how could your business make the world a better place? Well, that's a big question, but it's easy to ask that question. And I'd also take two further questions. I like questions, which I'll take from someone you'll be both familiar with, who's worked with me, which is Seth Godin, and he asks, if you're building something and you're creating something, which is, let's face it, what you do when you're making a business, ask yourself two questions: who's it for, and what's it for? So if you're going, who's our business? It's not just customers. Who's it for? To think about that and provide that space, and then also what's it for? What have we made? What are we selling? What's that for as well? And from that, things will start to flow. So, and when they do, don't just do it as a one-off exercise. Yeah, as Rima says, you've got to make it a regular thing to then explore ideas. And then on top of that, that's when the process starts to come in. So it just start is a glib thing to say, but allow that space to happen and make that one practical thing. Because even if you're doing really great stuff already, it's an opportunity to have that check and balance, which in the day-to-day, getting into the detail and the weeds of just running the business, it's easy to forget about.
Yeah, definitely. Nice thoughts from both of you. And I guess that's where we'll wrap up. But in terms of kind of some extra resources, Rima, you've got a book that you have been working on, all around playbook for being an impactful business. Where can people find out about that and get a copy?
Thanks for mentioning, Sky. So we're just about to publish next week the Impactful Business Playbook, and you can get yourself a copy at impactful.world. Yeah, hopefully it'll be a really useful tool to help you get from 0 to 1, really understand the basics of what it means to be an impactful organisation.
Amazing. Thanks, Rima. And Paul, I know as a B leader, and we were just talking about it's B Corp month next month. How can people get involved with that, and what is B Corp month?
B Corp Month is an annual celebration. It's actually global. It's not just in the UK, of all things B Corp. So whether you know nothing about it at all, or whether you've had some engagement, whether you work for a B Corp now, there's going to be an awful lot of content pushed out across the whole of the month of March. Each week in March is going to be themed around the 5 different sections of the impact assessment. So just keep an eye out on all the channels for inspiring stories and content and some practical tips about what you can do to learn more about B Corp, but actually start using some of the things that are incorporated within the process too. So yes, there will hopefully be a wall of digital noise around that, which would be a great thing. Obviously, I'm excited about it because I help businesses to do this, and that's part of what I do. So yeah, investigate. I would also say get a hold of a copy of Rima's book because it is fantastic. Please do that. And also check out Escape 100, which I think is really amazing. I think it's a really bold statement to incorporate the B Corp part of it. But for those of you wondering, there are lots of surveys about great places to work. And actually, what Escape have done, and I really love, is far, far more than just how well you're remunerated and stuff. It is all of that, but lots more too. So please go and check it out whether you're looking for a job or whether you're not. It's still investigating and get good ideas and explore intelligence. So yes, the things that you've created and done as well.
Great, thanks. I was going to talk about the Escape 100, but you sold it for me. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, if people want to check out the Escape, if you're looking for a job in a purposeful organization, that's a great place to work holistically. Check out the Escape 100. There are, I think, 380 roles open at those organizations, which is pretty amazing. And we also have created a calculator. So if you're an organization trying to see how you would score, then you can input your details and see what your score would be, so you can see how you would stack up. So check those out, and you can use those as tools. And otherwise, I'll just say thank you so much to both of you for joining today. Really insightful. I've got loads of ideas to take away and action for Escape, so I'm sure that other people who are listening will do the same. So huge thank you to you both, and thanks to everybody for watching.
Thanks for having us, Sky. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much, Sky. See you soon.
See you soon.
Bye, guys.